All right, here we go. Let's talk a little bit about the work. Gem, I got your name right once. I'm not saying it again, but Possession. Let's just talk first. Gem, I'm going to read what they have written for me here. A true globetrotter. That's good. We should all be globetrotters. Working in many markets, including Scandinavia, Canada, the US. You started working with telecine, moving to nonlinear grading with your flame background, and pushing your limits with grading tools. Currently based in Oslo, Norway. We should all be so lucky. Gem's work stretches across a variety of formats, including commercials, features, episodic, with a keen eye for detail and a strong visual sense. You were a jury member last year, so you knew how to game the system. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh, in 21 and 22. Oh, you really did. You were a mole, effectively, for this year. Well, good job. All right, let's talk a little bit about references for the work that you did on Possession, because it's really interesting. You could talk a little bit. I think, well, this first bit, in terms of creating a look for this project, talk a little bit about the conversations you had when you came on the project.
Sure. So the clip that we're seeing right now was one of the clips submitted for the entry. So this is the before, which is basically taken from the editorial. I was part of the project a bit later in the stage, so I wasn't part of any look development or pre-production. I got involved sort of roughly when they started editing, which is a little bit the nature of these types of projects. They get sort of shipped around, or sort of going around in different post facilities and trying to find a facility that would kind of cater to the budget. So I'd worked with Oscar and Henrik before on other productions, so we already had a good chemistry and collaboration, and they sort of wanted to have me on board. Initially, this is a film that's based during the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, and it takes place in northern Norway. And one of the initial references for the film was "There Will Be Blood" by Paul Thomas Anderson. However, we had a look at the film and the references and stills kind of linked to the project. And one of the things that we realized is, like, even though it takes place in a similar time, where it's shot, which is California and New Mexico, it has such a different quality of light that we felt trying to force Norway to look like California was a bit of a stretch and not right for the project. So what we did is essentially take what we liked about There Will Be Blood, which is the texture factor, even though it was shot on film and Panavision lenses, and in our case it was shot on Arri Alexa with V-Hawk anamorphic lenses, 74 vintage. So what we did, we just sort of took the texture factor of it, and then we were looking at, I was watching one of the early cuts of the film, and then I paused on a shot which was a wide vista, and I just looked at it and I was like, well, this kind of looks like a painting. And then I started looking at, instead of looking at other films, I started looking at works done by the romantic painters and landscape painters of Scandinavia and Russia and Finland. And so these were sort of the references that we sort of passed between Oscar and I and Henrik. And so what we did, we essentially just married this look and feel with a little bit of the texture from There Will Be Blood. And so that's the sort of end result.
One of the things I appreciate about it is, although it's got a very strong color look and a warmth to it, the prairie that sort of is in every one of those frames, or nearly, there's still that sort of skyline. The horizon line has enough blue in it, and the sky has at least some cleanliness in it of a white to really balance the frame nicely. Was that something that you guys talked about or tried to find?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, one of the things that we tried to sort of aim for in the film throughout is just having a clean white and a clean black in every frame. So there's always a neutral point for the image, and then all the other colors sort of fall into place a little bit, sort of in a nicer way. And yeah, credit to the art direction. They did a fantastic job with such a tight budget, and this was shot over 25 days between September and October, all shot on location. So it was a very quick, tight production. And yeah, I mean, great job all around, and we were able to just work really efficiently. I think we were graded over 10 days. So yeah, in and out.
10 days.
Yep.
Oh man. Don't tell Company 3 how long I'm coloring Joker for. All right, Marina, I think most people in this room want you to take a vacation, turn down some work so they can get some of the work, because obviously you're very busy with 3 nominees in this awards and 2 others before. Marina Stark's a Berlin-based freelance colorist who works her time grading a suite with different, and those of different post houses. She's now obviously a 5-time nominee in the Color Awards, and obviously our music video winner tonight. You work on a mixture of content, music videos, commercials, TV series, features, as we've seen, and you approach every project individually with passion for detail and complexity. You keep focus on what the image actually needs instead of relying on pre-built tools. And so let's look a little bit at the work you did on Maya's Hora, and I think we'll. Oh wait, first, yes, exactly. Let's listen to the DP sing your praises as he should.
Hello from Lebanon. Congratulations, Marina, on the well-deserved awards. Thank you, FilmLights and members of the jury for picking our film, and a warm hello to Stephen Lighthill. This was my first time working with Marina, and I thought the process was really amazing. I think it's super nice when a colorist first off shows a lot of enthusiasm towards the project and also shares the same artistic sensibilities, because there's a nice challenge that happens in the grade, but also a lot of trust that is established, and anything that is done for the sake of making a better film. For this project in particular, it was kind of challenging from the start for me, because Nadim, the director, comes from a live performance background, and this is the only way he visualizes his art. It has to unfold before your eyes, no replay. You focus on the whole picture instead of a particular character or landscape or so. No cutting, barely any camera moves in one angle, and specifically, colors have to be the same as they're, conceived for the stage. And in film, the details that you might linger on are very different, and it's mostly what we try to do in the grade session. We had to showcase the Mayas as this group of women as a whole and accent that power of that collective. And we needed to paint the film with bold and vibrant colors, trying to keep as much separation as possible, but also keeping this mystical world as captivating as it is live, and ensure that the essence of the group remains in the forefront. I think that color played a crucial role in achieving the balance and reinforcing that narrative. And I relied a lot on Marina's abilities to work on the details in every frame, to be able to echo that tale of these women breaking free while maintaining unity from scene to scene. This is a very different approach from what I do usually, because I try to shoot as much as possible in camera and do as little as possible in the grades, just fine-tuning. For this project, it was showing the whole picture and trying to find the right balance in post-production. I think the role of the colorist is often underestimated, so thank you, FilmLight, for giving the unsung heroes that make us look good the spotlights. Again, congratulations, Marina. Well deserved. I would have never done this without you, and we're all proud of you.
Let's look at a little video of just the look, and talk a little, if you could, Marina, about the building of this look and some of the complexities and sort of challenges that it presented.
Okay, so when Shadi approached me for this project, I was totally hooked, and he was really giving me a lot of freedom, saying like, hey, look, Marina, just do whatever you feel like, and then let's look at it together. There were no specific references, but we knew that we wanted it to be like mystical and very like bold colors. And because the scenes are also so long, we wanted to have different colors in the different scenes. So when you transfer into another scene, it is just refreshing for the eyes as a new chapter. And particularly in this scene, which is very golden, it was a bit tricky because the group of women, like everyone is important in there. There's no main subject, even if one of the dancers is in focus, but everyone was supposed to be important, and we wanted them to pop out. But it's like it's very monochromatic here, with the golden light, and then we have the golden jewelry and the skin tones. So we wanted to create as much separation as possible, but with keeping the golden palette. And my first instinct was actually to go a little colder, but that didn't really feel right. So we went back and warmed everything up. And the jewelry was not real gold, of course. So it had a yellowish, greenish tint. And I had to shift it more towards a warmer color, but then it got pretty close to the skin tones. So in order to separate both of them, I pushed the skin to be a little bit more magenta, like a rosy undertone. And yeah, also tried to shape the light a little bit more on the walls. And yeah, and then we went for like a colder diamond look, added some sparkles and halation. We also worked a little bit with the texture, blurring the super fine high frequencies, because there's a lot of like small details in the jewelry and stuff. So everything was supposed to be a bit smoother. It was really, really interesting on this project because I didn't work with an overall look that pushed everything into one direction, because every scene needed specific treatment. And so it ended up being like multiple small layers of adjustments until everything was brought out.
Yeah, it's beautiful work. So wait, how did you become involved in had you worked with the DB before?
No, it was my first time with Shadi, but there's a funny story, because last year at CAMERIMAGE, I had just worked with Chris Aoun on The Empress, which is nominated in Episodic. And he introduced me to another cinematographer. And this person introduced me to Shadi because he just sent me a random message like, hey, Marina, a friend of mine shot a music video and I think you would be perfect together. Can I connect you both? And I was like, yeah, sure. And actually he was right, because it was really great to meet him and to collaborate, even if it was just remotely, but yeah.
So you give like CAMERIMAGE like 10%? What is this? It's like they
That's
get
why
a
you have
little
to come
cut?
here.
Well, it just shows. Come here and get jobs.
Yeah, it's a great festival.
Exactly. All right, Dirk, let's go. Let's look a little bit at your work on Luden and talk a bit about this really cool look and everything. Let's tell you a little bit about Dirk. Dirk's a freelance colorist and post-production consultant. He worked for companies such as Aerie, Fallbrook, the Post Republic, We Fade to Grey, Zentropia, and films such as Lars von Trier's Antichrist, Sebastian Lelio's A Fantastic Woman, both incredible films, Alice Rohrwacher's Happy as Lazaro, and Roy Andersson's About Endlessness. I have so many questions about Roy Andersson, so I'm going to do that on a beer afterwards. He was head up of Upgrade, the world's first long-term educational program for color grading from 2015 to 2019, and is a full member of the Imago Technical Committee, the German Society of Cinematographers, BVK, and the Color Society, CSI. Let's talk about this particular scene and what you sort of put aside there, and tell us a little bit about how you built the grade and the textures of it. I think we even oh wait, sir, first we have the DP. Here, here. I, I think what he said was is essential. It's like my collaboration, I mostly do features, so you have a little bit more time. But yeah, the idea of getting colorists in early is one of my first calls I make when I get the call that I got the job. So I agree fully with that. Okay, you want to talk? Let's talk a little bit about the specifics of the grade of this film, of this project, and yeah, and the sort of breakdown of it.
On a side note, I kind of feel like I worked 10 years to get to that point that people would call me before. It took quite a while. And Tim was also referred to me by Christopher Owen, the same DP that I worked with before, who was actually sitting in a seminar at a film school. So that's how. He mentioned texture quite a lot, and I guess for all of us, this become more and more an important aspect of all images. That we not only manipulate colors, but also really try to transform the appearance on a spatial level, to say it in a technical word. So what you can see here is what I submitted to, or besides the actual excerpt from the series. This is just the color managed, kind of ungraded, and then the graded in terms of color image. And then we talked in those references about the effects of certain lenses, of the film material, what kind of effect does it have. It's beyond grain, of course. There's aspects like gate weave. We didn't go for that, but so to move the images, there's halation that others, I'm quite certain, having become very fond of as a tool to add, because it adds this nice little extra thing to all the kind of glowing edges and high contrast parts. So we did all of that. We even opted to actually distort the image a little bit. That was something we found out when comparing lenses, that one of the ones that Tim liked, but in the end for other reasons didn't want to go for, had a little bit more distortion, like a curvature that would make the faces stand out a little bit more, like give them a bit more volumetric appearance. You can't really replicate this correctly, but we thought, well, we tried around just a little lens distort as an effect, and we added this because it also broke the super high resolution. I mean, it was shot for 4.5K, and we had to deliver UHD, of course, but we felt it's back then in the 1980s, nothing would have looked like that, super crisp and so on. So we looked for various ways to break this and add a bit of patina on top of all of the effort that the production design did.
Do you think like Netflix demanded 4K? They knew we were just gonna fuck up all the images because we didn't like it that short? I feel like they don't know that they're like, yeah, well, shoot at 100K, but you know, could we make it 525 and then spit it back out?
It's another long discussion we can.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know it's a lot of it is like, make it dirtier, make it this, make it that. Yeah, it's a really cool project. Obviously, it has to look. Do you remember anything specifically challenging within the project? You know, it's such a long thing and put you on the spot without any warning, but I always find in any project, there's a couple scenes, and this is coming from a DP's perspective, and I always go, it's probably I screwed it up, but like where you just like you just can't nut out that scene is the one you keep returning to. Like you're like, oh, this is good, and then you hit that scene, you go, let's skip ahead, and we'll come back to this. Do you remember anything specifically, or even generally, what happens? How do you break out of that? Because it seems to happen with me, you know, almost universally on a project where there's some scene that just, you know, to this day I want to still recolor it. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened to me in, let's say, the early days, that I would always think, oh no, but I need to go back. But I've found with experience you get like more relaxed and say, no, let's leave it like that. I'm totally happy with how it looks right now. I don't actually remember a particular scene going back and back again. There were a few ones, but nothing where we really kind of banged our head against too often. But what I remember was a bit the struggle when we moved from the HDR grading, which we did first, to the SDR version, where we struggled, maybe not too much between Tim and me, first to find how to reduce the color volume a little bit. But then the showrunner who would supervise the grading and the commissioning editor had no need to get into the grading suite anymore. We were doing this remotely between Cologne and Munich anyway, but for the HDR kind of sign-offs and feedback rounds, they always had to get in the grading suite in Munich. But then starting to watch the SDR versions on whatever they had added a bit of confusion at some point in the beginning, and we needed some time to kind of then to convince everyone that we're looking at the same and that we would actually agree on how it looks. Because then we had the point that, oh, maybe now it's become too dark. And it was the showrunner and the commissioning editor to kind of push us. No, actually we can go darker, which was like, wow, okay. Usually like they are the ones to
Get scared.
Yeah,
exactly.
and want to see, of course, some expression in the actors' faces and so on. And here it was sometimes, no, let's push it even further.
Is that HDR deliverable? Because it's interesting in my experience, and this is personal to me because I know other people do it the other way. I always start on at least on a DCP, I'll start with the theatrical version and then up-res to the HDR, not up-res, but redo the HDR master after. But that's just because I'm old and I used to do Hazeltine timing. I don't even know what HDR is, really. But like, you know you're delivering an HDR version, so is that generally how you start, or is that somebody else's decision on where you start as your first master?
Well, this was the first show where I did this first, because it's only my second episodic work. The first one wasn't meant to be HDR. So here it was also the first time for me to start HDR first, because on the feature films that I graded, it's the same. We start for the DCP. We start for the theatrical release, and no one wants to spend like the majority of the time watching on a small monitor the HDR trim pass and then going back to the cinema for just 2 days to kind of, which sometimes I think would benefit in a different way, but it's a really tough thing, and I can totally understand. So here it was the first time, and then also the first time going from that HDR version to SDR, where you kind of really need some time to get used to as well, because you lose quite a bit at some point. But then, yeah, it was mostly for some communication hiccups in the beginning that we struggled with that a bit more. So it wasn't 6 weeks, I think it was like 7.5 in total.
Yeah.
Which was the longest period for me, because I never get to do more than 10, 12, 13 days maybe on a feature.
I really have it so good. I have to remind myself that. Be grateful for that. All right, let's talk for a second. We'll come back around for some more other questions as well, of course. But let's look at the work of Barbie. We have something from Yvonne to talk about the look, and Mandy. Well, you can speak to it before we see Yvonne, and then we'll come back to a question about that. But you helped a bit in the grade. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Barbie.
Well, I shot some of the additional photography at the end of post-production for Rodrigo, because he was directing his movie in Mexico. So I was on the film for about 3 weeks, and then they were going to do start the DI, and he couldn't make it back for the DI, so he asked me to do that with Yvonne. So I sat in on the DI, and because we'd already had many discussions about the look of the movie and the way that they built the LUTs in pre-production, and the extent that they went to get this, what they called Techno Barbie, which was the main LUT in Barbie Land, and then the LUT for the real world was based on a film emulation, so a Kodak film emulation. So yeah, I got to, because I was familiar with the movie already and the amazing work that Rodrigo had done, and so I spent a lot of time speaking to him back and forth from Mexico to LA, and making sure that he was happy with what we're doing, but he trusted us, and in the end, and yeah, that's. Congratulations to Yvonne.
Yeah. Let's look at, well, first let's look at Rodrigo, who obviously has a lot to say, and he's going to tell us now.
Hi. I would just like to congratulate Yvonne for his FilmLight Colour Award. I'm very proud of you, Yvonne. This is really a highly deserved recognition to your work. I've known Yvon for a long, long time. We met first on Alexander, a movie that Oliver Stone directed. At Eclair is where we first color graded this film. And since then, I was really amazed at his understanding of color, the psychological aspects of color, but also his deep knowledge of the subtlety of how to achieve color. And also, his background is photochemical, just as mine. I started color grading my films and not understanding any of it back in Mexico in photochemical. And so Alexander was one of my first digital films, digitally color graded. We shot on film, but we did DI at Eclair in Paris. And I learned so much from Yvon, and our approach even back then was as if it were a photochemical grade with points of color and density. And I was just amazed at the difference that one point of magenta or red or cyan would do to the image. And I really have learned a lot with Yvon, and I consider him my teacher in terms of color. And the work on Barbie is extraordinary. Figuring out the lookup tables, we ended up doing Techno Barbie, which was based on 3-strip Technicolor. And so all the work creating the LUTs and really the subtlety of the color of the skin tones and all these, I mean, I say subtlety, but obviously the film has very bold colors, but just the nuance of skin tone. That's, Yvon is a master at that, and I'm really proud of you, Yvon, and very happy that you received this award. I think it's very well deserved, and I wish I could be there, but I can't. And I understand you're not there either. But Mandy, thank you for receiving this award on his behalf. And once again, I'm very happy about this, and thank you very much.
Yeah, Levon has something to talk about in terms of more specifically about the work on the film. I think we have a video from him.
Rodrigo and I, since we work together, we always approach the color grading same way. We do a lot of work before the shooting, and we like to create LUTs, which would help everybody during the shooting. So usually I work with the same show LUT, which is a film emulation that I have pretty much for all the movies. And then we do modified LUTs. So for this one, we start with a Technicolor 3-strip LUT that we created for Killers of the Flower Moon. But then so the color was very well separated. But then we changed a bit the color to be more with a Barbie color. Oh, it was pretty easy. It was the Mattel color, you know. She wanted the blue turquoise, the pink, to be like exactly like in a Barbie box, you know. So we use this as a reference, and then we try to have all this color to be exactly like those color. But of course, we didn't want it to have the people in the skin to be too much warm, you know. So this movie was particularly a big challenge because of the color of the Barbie world, with those with pink, red, and blue. They were so vivid that we wanted to keep the skin tone more in pastel world, and all the other colors of the set more colorful. So that was the challenge, and we created this LUT that Greta Gerwig named Techno Barbie, and it was something that everybody could see during the shooting. Usually when you change color, you use the U shift, and you push the red, you push the yellow, the blue, etc. So everything becomes more saturated. So we needed a tool this time, and so that's why we asked a friend of us to create this PPL plugin, which allowed us to to move the color in a direction we wanted. So we could maybe have a red more red without the skin tone too red. We name it PPL for Prieto Panzini Lucas. And this is something that now, this is a plugin that we can have now in the Resolve and in the Basslight, but at the time, like 3 years ago, when we did it for Killers of Flower Moon, it didn't exist yet. Well, with this plugin, we were able to push the pink, the blue, and the red without affecting the skin tone. So when we can show this body 5 lot with and without, you don't see really much the skin tone they stay the same, but all the other colors of the set are more vivid. Yes, because the techno Barbie was so colorful that when Barbie goes into the real world, it was in Venice and we had a lot of clouds. So of course, this scene were a bit dull. You know, they were looks a bit desaturated. So the challenge was to have those scenes different, but in the meantime, we didn't want it to be too desat, and also wanted to keep their clothes more into the Barbie world at the time. Yes. No, it's funny because we talk about that during the color grading. There's never enough pink in this movie. That was something very funny because usually magenta and pink, this is not a color we love in movies. But for this one, it was never enough pink, never enough. And that was very funny because this was, the more we had those color visible, the more we were happy. So that movie was something about colors that they usually don't do. Yes, it was, because for the first time I had the feeling that people were talking about the story and the color pretty much at the same time. And the color became so important that maybe that's why I'm here today, because this is first time that people mention color so much in the movies, and Barbie was the perfect movie for that. I remember when we were working on the dailies of Killers of Flower Moon, and Rodrigo told me, Yvan, our next movie will be Barbie. And I said, Barbie? What do you mean Barbie? He said, yes, but no worries. It's going to be a Greta Gerwig movie. I said, oh my God, that's something that's going to be so important, and yes, I want to be part of it. But that was very funny to hear about Barbie after Scorsese. And today, when we see the two movies, they are so different, but people talk so much about color with Barbie. I think that was a very good idea. I was surprised because, first time when we talk about Barbie, I never thought that it would be this. And today, when I said Barbie is one of the best experience in my life, it is true. It's just it was so a fantastic journey.
I love that movie, Barbie. I mean, it really worked. It's interesting. Did you, once you were, there's a question for you, Mandy, just in taking over that, I guess it was rather, even though you did the pickups and stuff, to have another set of eyes in the room was more important than just, I guess, Yvan working alone and calling Rodrigo or sending him stills or whatever it is. And did you feel like, was it a strange responsibility to sort of be sitting? I mean, how long did you spend in the DI?
I was there for the whole time, so 3 weeks. Yvan had done a pass before I came in, which is normal. He just balancing things out. I think it's about having the eyes of a DP to talk about lighting and, transitions and things like that. And we I've never worked with Yvonne before. I've also never done a DI for anybody else before, so it was an interesting thing for me. But I was a little bit concerned that I didn't want to put too much of a stamp on what they've already done, you know, my own vision. But I understood enough. Rodrigo was amazing at explaining to me exactly the intention of the look of the movie, so I felt quite relaxed when we started. But you know, Yvonne talks about the LUT. The LUT is pretty amazing because we would be pushing those colours, those magentas and the reds, and it would not be affecting the skin. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And he works on base light, and which is, you know, like Rodrigo said, I'm also come from a photochemical background, and the way Yvonne works is he starts with RGB density. And so we did a couple of passes on just that, and then we would start doing windows and adding little bits and pieces. But, I mean, the film was very consistently shot, so it was never any dramas or anything like that. But yeah, and I like working that way. I much prefer Baselight than Resolve, I have to say, and in my experience, and I really did love Luster, but I think they're all gone now. Because I come from photochemical background, it was the closest thing for me to relate to, you know.
Yeah, I might have to try it. You might get me here to try Baselight. All this talk. All right, let's move on because I have some general questions, and I'd love Mandy to stay if she can. So let's talk a little bit about the commercial. Let's move on to Tim's work with Zara Man, but let's talk a little bit about Tim as well. So senior colorist Tim Messick has been coloring spots in New York for well over a decade, best known for his long-standing collaborations with some of the top directors in the advertising industry, commercial credits across the spectrum, huge clients. He won the best commercial grade in 2021 for his approach to coloring the spot Spring Summer 21 for Dior. So obviously when you have a huge brand and pretty people, you turn to Tim. Several years ago, he earned acclaim when director Spike Jonze hired him to do real-time color grading for the first ever YouTube Music Video Awards. That's cool. I gotta go on YouTube, I guess, and look at that. That sounds really cool. I missed that. He's turned the stage performances into cinematic music videos on the fly for live internet audience. And he also colored feature films, including First Reform for Paul Schrader. I think Philippe has something to say right here, DP.
Hi team, congratulations. Your work is fantastic. You are truly an artist, so enjoy the party tonight. Well done.
Tim, talk a little bit about, you have a relationship with the director before. Tell us a little bit about how you came to the project and how your approach is, considering you've worked with the director for some time.
Yeah, Fabian and I have been working together for more than 20 years. I would say his approach and his aesthetic has informed how I work, the way I see things more than anyone else. So he comes up with different worlds for every one of these projects, and it's always exciting to see where the next one is going to be and what it, you know. You know, he's got a spectacular vision, and it was, you know, the process for this, you know, a lot of times people might want to just like over-exaggerate things, but this was about, you know, kind of having little peaks and valleys of like, you know, this is the strong section right here with the intense red light, but then we have to subdue some of these more desert areas to contrast off of the smoke. The orange smoke in particular, was a little bit challenging here and there to keep it off the skin tone, to keep that clean, to keep the clothing clean. Also dealing with, this was a one-day shoot. So as you can see, there's definitely different times of day and different conditions that we had to mess around with, so.
Yeah, I was thinking back to what Jem said about having a clean white reference and a clean background. And what's interesting is having that white border, like a photo, is this constant like clean reference that everything balances off of. Yeah. But yeah, I think one of the things when I watched it that I was so impressed with, knowing how atmosphere and smoke can contaminate the image across the spectrum. And now you have colored smoke. Is how'd you make the wardrobe and I mean, you know, the clothes that you're selling, as well as this, everything that's within those behind that? Is it literally isolating the smoke and isolating the clothes? I mean, all the techniques that we're used to using, but in a really sort of powerful way, because it's incredibly clean. The skin tone never feels contaminated by the smoke.
Yeah. Yeah, the stuff here by the pool was probably some of the most challenging of it, like, you know, just keeping the skin separated from everything so that we don't have any contamination. But, you know, some strategic windowing, little time with the tracker, and magic can happen, you know.
I was thinking about, like, what Mandy was saying, or no, maybe it was Rodrigo was saying about Venice, and how you were like, well, you think you're going to California, you're going to get a sunny day. Obviously, like this spot, they don't shoot if it's not sunny. I mean, literally, that thing doesn't work if that's not a sunny day.
Well, you would be surprised.
I know, but this is the thing. And then they turn to the colorist and go fix this shit. And I'm always like, you can't make cake steak, right? Like, I've done it. I know. I remember Seamus McGarvey on Along Came Polly. He's like, we went to Hawaii and it rained for 4 days. And they're like, make it blue. And it's like, oh my God. I've struggled with that like crazy.
Yeah.
What? I mean, this is more now opening it up to the group, but I mean, you were part of at least the Venice stuff. Was it sort of like where you now have to make it look sunnier than what it is?
Yeah, well, as everyone will know, you can't make overcast look sunny photographically. So what we did was just push the contrast and try to get as much as we could out of the skies. There wasn't much there. It was marine layer, so it was that kind of soft sun, but it never looks like full blue sky sun.
I've never seen sky replacement work either. It's like, it's one of those things that I think about that just globally, and anyone can step in terms of there's an inherent, it's baked in, right? There's something inherent to the footage, our problem that now we put on you guys, that can't fundamentally be turned upside down. But yet there are times when we're asked to, like, you know, make something night that was shot day, or those kind of like really transformative things. How do you guys feel about that? I was talking to Simone, one of our jurors, last night as we were watching the movie, and it's like the ethics of color, right, and restoration, and like, you know, I was sort of, fuck ethics. I thought it was cool. Like I said, like, well, imagine taking the apartment and just going, I don't know what it's apartment, you know, like, let's make it look like what you had the tools today to recolor the apartment, and what might it look like as an experiment? Like, how do you guys feel about that ethically? And, you know, they have a whole rules thing where she works where they can't touch anything except, you know, because of course it's not the intention of some dead director and cinematographer. And I respect that. But also the powerful tools we have can be transformative, of course, as we see in the work. Anyone? You've got something to say. I know you do.
Yeah, because as we all guess watch what's happening with artificial intelligence, machine learning, the tools getting more mature by the hour and more convincing with their results. So I also would just ask myself, okay, how long will it take until I have to speak to my grading system? It might be cool because then I could do my T next or whatever. Push up a little window there, track that face. But then we also see how deepfake was, or even more simple, relighting now. How do you feel about that? That on a decent shot, it kind of works, that you can place an additional light source there to add a little bit of backlight on your actor's head. So I don't know, I don't have a real answer, but more questions basically. But I do have some thoughts that we did regarding remastering. I don't want to really say restoration work, because none of us has had any experience with that. But within a group of the German societies, German Society of Cinematographers, we actually sat down and wrote a paper of like 4 pages, giving our thoughts to, okay, what would we wish that would happen when there's a work to be scanned from film or whatever, and to be shown here. Like a friend of mine regraded The Invincible together with Peter Seidlinger, and as far as I remember, Peter was like, let's forget what it was back then. Let's use all the tools that we have now. And I think as long as it's the DP sitting there with you and saying that, then I'm totally okay with that. But we are facing, of course, with like older work, the situation that there is not the DP anymore, or it's not accessible, or she's not accessible. So for that, we kind of thought, okay, when maybe you put down a little bit of a recommendation on where to refer to, what kind of sources you should look at, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, when you talk about projects that don't really have anyone left except maybe an estate or a studio that owns it, it's like who has the right to judge which tools are going to be used and to what extent you're going to change the image. Yeah, so I think that's going to be an important discussion to be had in the next few years of who takes charge and who takes ownership of how far we're going to push the image, or are we going to just take an old Blu-ray or a DVD and say, well, this is what it looked like, let's just make it look similar, or do we try to fix the imperfections that did exist? And so, yeah, I think that, there's a ethical discussion that needs to be had, and yeah.
I mean, coming from photochemical, I remember, you'd watch the work print and yell, too yellow, more green, 2 points magenta, and it would be gone. And then you'd wait a couple days and get a new work print and watch it again, right? Check print, and if I go back and I watch films from the 80s and the 90s and earlier, you see, I'm like, oh shit, that went magenta. And it's like, well, do you fix it now? Like if you remaster, I've never remastered something I've done.
No, and I think that's a good point. I mean, just even film now, if you scan it with the scanners that we have today, you realize there's so much grain and texture, and then whose decision is it to reduce the grain, or do you not reduce the grain? And that affects color, that affects so many things. And then when you look at a lot of the films that have been remastered, sometimes there's just no grain, but it's like, this was shot on film. There's nothing there. And now you have this new generation of DPs that if they do shoot on film, they don't want any noise reduction, which I think Tim, having graded stuff back in the day with music videos, is I don't think any DP wanted to see any grain on their film.
No.
That was just no. And post houses took so much effort into buying the best noise reducers and to having the cleanest output from their telecines or scanners, that now it's like, if you're remastering a film, how much grain is enough or too much? So that's
a great question. Well, it speaks actually to another question I have, which is about, and this is, I was looking at Yvonne's resume and back in France and saw that obviously he was responsible for Amélie. And, we always think of like these tentpole movies that change the conversation, and whether it's, something like The Conformist or, Seven, and then you think of Amélie, where suddenly it's like, wait, you can do this? Or, oh, brother, we're out there. Where suddenly the digital color space became now another tool that could be used in a massively creative way. And then that becomes like a trend. And when I see the trends, and even like when we first started shooting digital, and you would see commercials where they would just be delivered in log, and then log would end up on TV. So yeah, I don't know if maybe Marita, you could talk to or just like your experience with trends and how it's like, I'm sure they'll be like, let's put more pink in, or this idea of grain versus no grain, or clean versus, all of that, which is, I see it happening in real time. You're like the resident millennial, or you're are you Generation Z? What is it?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of trends, and at some point, I always think like, okay, what else can we do that sets everything apart? It's always a challenge, and sometimes we don't have to go for something new, but I always wonder what comes next. And I remember seeing Amélie for the first time, for example, back when I didn't even work in film, and it just stayed with me for so long. And I always wondered, what was it like back then? Because if you have this bold move, it can either it ends up being cringe, or it's something cool and new, and I think it's a bold decision to make, and I love to see that. Yeah. What was the question?
No, it was, but you speak to like that courage to make such a big move, because I've revisited Amelie and I'm like, it's a big move today, like at that the skin tone and the color and the contrast, and it's like it's a big swing, and you're right, it could be awful, and that I think is always where you're trying to stay on the edge of the knife of like pushing it a little bit. I mean, right? It's when you're scared, it's probably is like you're doing something right, or you fail, whatever. Do it again. I mean, what do you see trends? We see trends, right? Sometimes you make the trend.
Yeah, and I also think that you get asked to copy other things too, especially in commercials. Like someone's seen a commercial and that's the latest thing, and then you have to reproduce it too. But I also, you know, I just find with colour timing now, we can do so much more every year, every time, that we used to have to send things back to VFX. But now we can do it in the room, which is a really great thing, because I always find that when I'm in there and in control of it, I mean, we work with great VFX people, but I can keep it subtle and visible working with a colorist, and just the whole, that it's changed so much, and it changes every time I go in there.
I mean, I know we're already a little late, and I wanted to say, I don't think we can go over, but I'll try. But I'll ask one question. One thing I think about, because this is my question is for each of you to answer, which is, what do you want to see the future of color be, right? And what do you think it will be? What would you like to see? What would you like to see if you use Baselight, them develop, that you think is a good use of technology? One of the things I'll start by saying, one of the things I think is so destructive about AI and the discussion of AI, when it comes to creative things, art, our work, all that, is the loss of the apprentice. Because you don't become Andy Walker right away. Like I mean, maybe, do you? No. You have to sort of work underneath people and learn and have a sort of presence. And this idea that you could do a first pass of color purely on the computer, and some of these tools that I've seen, even in the most recent Adobe update and all that, generative fill and those kind of things, I think is amazing, and why not use it? Because it's efficient and time-saving, but it's that you lose the next generation of masters, and I think that's going to be really destructive, that we don't see coming if we don't get really careful. But what do you see as the future of color? Is it just, no grain, nothing, clean again? Are we going clean again? Who wants to jump in first? And what would you like to see it be, the future?
I'll take a quick stab. I think a lot of the talk with AI jumps over a lot of steps that would be useful, because it's very flashy for like Adobe or a company like that to show you, look, we can generate images just off of some random words. There's a lot of steps in the process that would be amazing to have taken care of, like just match the resizes of every shot, match the speed change of every shot in the EDL. Real basic, kind of prep sort of things that we've just jumped over to be like, okay, make this person into a duck, and let's have that, be what the AI is used for. It's like, well, there's a lot of simple processes that would be great straight out of the gate that we could use.
Yeah, I agree. I think like one of the things we tend to forget is the amount of prep that actually goes into prepping a timeline before the colorist sits down, the conforming process of just the eye matching of the edit versus the actual camera raw, and the discrepancies that exist in time codes and stuff like that, and just the painstaking work that goes in the background of just getting the timeline up and running. I think that's something that AI could address, just sort of being able to look at a quick time reference and then just say, okay, and this is the camera raw, match the framing, match the retimes, so you're not sitting there trying to do curve retiming and so yeah, and then and to Tim's point, and then there's the other aspect of like changing, people's faces and so on and so forth, and I think that's an interesting discussion to have of like how far it's going to go and the learning algorithms that we have. I mean, if you've sort of fooled around with anything Mid-Journey or Firefly, they all have their distinct look and feel, and I think that's sort of a bit dangerous, because I think we're going to quickly find out that things are starting to look very similar in terms of AI and the images that are generated, of like, oh, it just has an Adobe feel, oh, it has a Mid-Journey feel. And I think that's kind of probably going to be one of the challenges and maybe the pros of actually having a colorist and saying, no, we'll fix it with a human, as opposed to just having an AI generate something. You're like, oh, this looks like an AI. So, yeah.
I totally agree, and I think we also underestimate the power of happy accidents, because sometimes when you can't get to the point where you want to go, you have to think outside the box, and then sometimes weird things happen and they turn out pretty good, and you're like, okay, that was not what I was going for, but it looks cool. So I would not want to lose this step with AI, and I also think, then it might all look similar. But in terms of tools, what I would really like to see is to work more with a depth mat. Like, it would be cool to control colors in the background and in the foreground, not only selecting the hue and the saturation, but like the depth. And there's already like this depth mat plugin in Resolve, but it never worked for me, so it would be cool to see something like this.
I think that sounds doable. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree. That would be a nice feature. And once in a while, we still use EDLs, right? I think that's from 1980, if not before. So yes, I totally agree. There could be some other tasks be optimized before we go into recreating images completely from the ground up.
And just another point, just to add also, like, it would be, I think in the not so distant future, we'll probably have an AI that could do the job of, sadly, a junior colorist, of just matching up just a scene roughly. But I feel like, what we do, our craft, I think, is also in a little bit of a transition phase and a bit of a danger, because I feel like we see less and less assistants in the room learning the craft of how it actually works, not just from an artistic standpoint or technical, but also from a social and how to run the room. And that's not something you could do with an AI. I think that's, a lot of what we all do as colorists is human interaction. And if you're talking about something gritty or dark, it's part of our job to extract what you feel is dark or cold and put that onto the screen. So, yeah.
Although that Interstellar robot had a humor setting, so maybe
right.
we can do. Anyway, okay, we got to wrap it up. All right, Wolfgang, come say a couple words and thank you everyone for joining, and sorry we went over.
Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and we hope to see you again next year.